Hello, comrade. How are you? How do you feel? Do you feel alone? Do you feel like life is empty? Like you wake up, you go to school or work, and you get there as quickly as possible, and then you get back home as quickly as possible. And do you feel like when you finally get back home, when you should be able to relax and have fun, do you feel like you really just turn on Netflix or TikTok or something and you let the hours pass you by as you mindlessly consume content, stuck in a never ending loop of doom scrolling and brain rot to avoid the terrible news of the world around you? If you feel that way, then Ray Bradbury's 1953 three-star classic might describe what is wrong with your life. It describes a future where people spend as much time as they can in a TV virtual reality, replacing the walls of their living rooms with screens so that they can live within their TV shows as much as possible. A world where people are disconnected, only ever talking about TV or shallow things, ignoring wars, the literal wars that erupt around them, even when their loved ones might die in those wars. A world where nobody talks about their pain, a world where nobody reads. In fact, books are illegal, and the main character, Guy Montag, is a fireman, someone who burns books in the houses of those who read them. The problem with brain rot isn't the content itself, it's what the content replaces. If you wake up and you spend 4 hours watching TikTok, well, that's 4 hours that you could have spent with loved ones, forming relationships, improving yourself, doing something you actually love. But people don't spend so much time on TikTok because it gives them long-lasting memories that they cherish. They don't do it for love, they do it compulsively, without thought, almost like an addiction. And Guy's wife, Mildred, is shown almost as a drug addict, addicted to TV. She thinks about it constantly as it numbs her pain. She wants to spend all of the money she possibly can on it. It has stolen her memory and cognitive function. It has made her miserable and suicidal, and she still wants more. And both of our characters, Guy and Mildred, are deeply affected. Neither one can even remember when or how they met, and everyone in this world is deeply isolated. The connections that do exist within this world, even the deepest, strongest connections, seem shallow and based on nothing. There is no shared experience or perspective. There is only two people occupying the same space. Empty. Nobody forms community with their neighbors either. Nobody seems to care that much when their spouse goes off to war. People spend only a few days per month with their children. When Mildred, Guy's wife, tries to kill herself via a drug overdose, the people who pump her stomach say they have seen many cases over the past few years. The fire chief, the guy in charge of burning all of the books, describes how society reached this point. Quote, "Picture it. 19th century man with his horses, dogs, carts, slow motion. Then, in the 20th century, speed up your camera. Books cut shorter. Condensations, digests, tabloids, everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending." He later describes how even the classics would be condensed into a single page. He says Hamlet would be just a page. The thing is, he's describing modern reality to a certain extent. Have you seen the ads for Blinkist? It's literally just a service to condense books down into a few minutes. It promises to give you the core ideas of a book as if that were the only true value of the book. If you ideas in a bullet point, you can just sit back and listen as the cold AI voice gives you the most general summary of a book imaginable, as if hundreds of pages of a book were just a hard shell around a small pearl of what's actually good and useful within a book. And now it's even worse. As AI summaries become more and more common, people can now just paste a 20-page document into a chatbot and read the summary without having to be bothered with any of the details. One of the characters tells us what's wrong with the society of Fahrenheit 451. There are three things missing: quality of information, leisure, and the ability to take action. By quality of information, he means depth, texture, things that inspire complex thoughts. And I think this is all something we've seen to varying degrees. Reality TV produced to create drama that's engaging to watch as cheaply as possible, that doesn't even stick with you. Content designed as second screen entertainment because it's assumed that the viewer will be playing a game or mindlessly scrolling while watching something. Insipid TikTok videos where you can spend hours watching, but you can't remember anything the next day. Brain rot, by definition, is not high quality, it is not complicated, and it does not involve thought. And even what is supposed to be more intellectually stimulating is used as something comforting. So much of it is used as almost background noise, something to listen to while you exercise, do the dishes, or even fall asleep, which incentivizes it to be long, comforting, and as low effort as possible. It's something I was actually thinking about while watching a recent Zoe B video about Jordan Peterson's university, and how, to a certain extent, all educational content creators sell the feeling of learning, and any actual learning is a secondary product. It's made me think about the content I consume and produce, and whether it's challenging or just something that fills an empty space. Which leads to the second thing missing from society: leisure. It's not enough to just have information, to have art, but we need time and space to consider it. Many people are overworked and overstressed and do not have the time to really consider complicated ideas. We cannot blame the working single mothers of the world for not having the time to read Ulysses. But leisure is now often something we deny ourselves. We feel we must always be productive, always be doing something, and we have no room for boredom. If there's nothing going on, if there's only silence, many of us are uncomfortable in that silence, and we reach instinctively to our phones to fill that silence with whatever brain rot the algorithm has to offer us. And the third thing missing from society is the ability to take action. Obviously, the restrictions in the dystopia of Fahrenheit 451 are far greater than our restrictions within the present world, but I do think that many people feel that action cannot be taken. In the US, we live in a supposed democracy, but every presidential election we are left to choose between the lesser of two war criminals. One party promises to make the government ineffective, and another party promises that minor reforms will change everything. Obama, who'd won the presidential Democratic nomination in 2008 against Hillary Clinton, in part because he had voted against the war in Iraq, did not have it together to close the illegal base in Guantanamo Bay or end the war in Afghanistan as he had promised, and he had no problem sending soldiers into Pakistan to kill people, using drones to commit war crimes, and bombing Libya without declaring war. Now Donald Trump, who ran on a campaign of no new wars, will sit there on national TV and say that he just started 2 new wars, but we shouldn't complain because the other wars lasted so long and his are still new. Our lives are not based around community. Many people feel alone, friendless, incapable of changing anything, so that if they do read or watch a great movie or experience great art in any way, they feel incapable of turning that feeling into outward change. Perhaps to a greater extent, the characters of Fahrenheit 451 are separated from nature itself. There are 3 animals in the majority of the book. There's a hound, which Guy interacts with. It's a robotic hound that they use to hunt down and kill people who read books or commit other crimes. There's the salamander, which is what they call the fire truck. And there's what they call the snake, which is what they use to save his wife from the drug overdose, to get everything out of her stomach. So within the world of Fahrenheit 451, even nature has been replaced. And the book makes it very clear that the ideology it is criticizing is an anti-intellectual ideology without depth or community. It is an ideology of suffering, not just for those who were burned alive with their works, but for its strongest proponents as well. We as a species have not been made better or happier by having a constant stream of entertainment and distractions in our pocket at all times. So now that we recognize the parts of our world in the world of Fahrenheit 451, how can we claw our way out? Our hero, kind of an anti-hero really, Guy Montag, begins unraveling before the book starts. He already has a small library of illegal books that he has taken from houses he burned down, and he already had a conversation with someone who reads books, but he doesn't really wake up until he starts talking to a teenage girl who seems to come from a family of readers. Honestly, this part made me feel a little uncomfortable, like he needed an underage manic pixie dream girl to wake him up. But I think we can take the broader understanding of needing to form community with others to be able to change and improve as people. Later, Guy does something truly great. He challenges himself and he reads. He reconsiders everything he has ever been taught and he tries to come at it with an open mind, even if it is difficult. And finally, he tries to take action. And if we want to take this book as a guide, we should read things, challenging things, think about them, and ask ourselves how we can change as people because of those things that we read. How can we be better people within the world as a result of what we have learned? Ultimately, Guy leaves. He leaves his job, his wife, and the city, and he joins a group of academics in exile. I don't think we ourselves must abandon our society, but I do think we should form groups within it. In Fahrenheit 451, they all have their role. They all have memorized a book and can keep it in a kind of human library where each person is a node that has a book. And I do think within a group, each person will have their own perspective and value to add to the group as a whole. But I did find the framing of this within the book a tad stupid, honestly. There's no real explanation given to the memorization. They just claim that anything you have ever read once is something you memorized and can, remember even if you hadn't had this ability before, which means in theory every human being should just be a walking library and you wouldn't need each one to work as a node within the library. They would all individually contain hundreds if not thousands of books. And I do think it might have a certain metaphorical weight, like, really, they were all adding their own perspective, but it feels mostly like a way to avoid the pain that book nerds feel when we think about how many great books have been lost and will be lost to the sands of time. I mean, seriously, who among us has not felt saddened thinking of the fall of the Library of Alexandria? I think, honestly, a better framework would have been if they each tried to write a new book to create something new to strive towards. Conservation of past literature cannot be sufficient for humans to live our best lives. We must strive to create, and surely Ray Bradbury knew this, else he would have spent his life teaching the classics, and he wouldn't have been a novelist to write this book. And I want to be careful how I talk about it, because as a dystopia, a story must feel in some way reflective of the negative aspects of our reality, and it must also feel believable. And I do not think that this book entirely succeeded in this, if I'm being honest. Margaret Atwood is famous for saying that everything that happened in her dystopia, Handmaid's Tale, has happened somewhere in real life, so that nobody could ever accuse her of making it up. And I think this is what separates a dystopia from satire. Satire exaggerates an ideology or viewpoint to make fun of it. Satire doesn't take its opposition seriously, but dystopia, on the other hand, must take its opposition very seriously. And this is where we can see some dystopias fail. A book like Ayn Rand's Anthem fell apart for me. And I'm leaving a link in the description of this video to my video about Anthem by Ayn Rand, in case you want a more in-depth analysis. But grosso modo, Anthem portrayed collectivism in a cartoonishly unbelievable way, collectivism being the central ideology it was criticizing. And it showed it in a way that was far too absurd to be dystopian, and it took itself far too seriously to be satire. And for me, the central question when interrogating Bradbury's dystopia is, why did they burn books? Bradbury offers an explanation because of the offense of the minority. And here, I think he means in the broadest sense of the word, For example, Catholic would be a minority because the majority of people are not Catholics. And in this way, everyone would belong to multiple minorities. And I don't think he strictly means like a racial or ethnic minority, although this idea is very clearly included in Bradbury's conception of the idea of minority. In fact, in the coda of this edition of the book, he specifically talks about what he means when he says minority. And he does have some examples. He brings up a woman who told him she would have liked it if there were more female characters in his work. He talks about a black person who said that the black characters in his work were offensive stereotypes. And he talks about a southern white person who felt that his work was anti-white for talking about black people too positively, or something like that. And he also talks about censorship more broadly. He talks about short stories being edited down and abridged in anthologies to get them all to fit, thus kind of killing them in a way. The most blatant act of censorship he talks about is he mentions how Fahrenheit 451 itself had been censored for school editions because it used certain bad words like damn. And one other example he gives, he talks about how a university wouldn't put on a production of his play, Leviathan 99, because it had no women in it. And he seems to view the burning of all books as the end result of this mass censorship. For me, it's just the problem is it's not believable. All of these groups have competing interests and thoughts and ideas and things they want in the world, and I don't see how they could all settle into one apathetic unity. Small groups of people may be offended by a work. A university might refuse to put on a play, but when we look at when books really do get banned or burned, it is because of the rule of the majority, not the minority. The majority decides books concerning certain religions are not acceptable. It is the majority that decided to burn books in Nazi Germany. They weren't burning books about gay people and rushing to buy copies of Mein Kampf because Nazism was a small minority. Even in the US, when the US wouldn't publish works like Ulysses, it was in defense of the morality of the majority. When people were blacklisted, it was the will of the anti-communist majority. Even today with modern cancel culture, what we see is that if someone is cancelled, it is only ever by the will of the majority. Everyone could agree that what Bill Cosby did was bad and unforgivable, so he was cancelled. There is, however, wide disagreement about J.K. Rowling, so she is still one of the richest and most influential people to ever live, because of the majority. And censorship is not pushed to simply avoid disagreement and discomfort, but rather to actively promote a specific ideology. The ideology of Fahrenheit 451 is empty. They are anti-intellectual and believe that reading is bad, but they live empty lives. They seem to have no real opinion of the words that they engage in, just that, they always vote for the same party because the guy from the other party is ugly. There is no mention of feminism or racism or anti-racism or religion in Fahrenheit 451 because all the people who subscribe to those ideologies and beliefs abandoned them as soon as they didn't have to see anything they didn't like anymore. As if the Christian would stop believing in Christ when people went long enough without talking about atheism. And honestly, I think his criticisms of censorship due to people being offended would be a better explanation of why the most popular media is often generic and uninteresting, and not why there would be full-blown censorship. For example, Disney will do its best to not make a truly controversial movie, because movies require very large investments, and yet another MCU installment will be much more likely to get a good return on that investment than a controversial movie that upsets half of their market. But now you can publish any kind of book you want, and the idea that people sending you letters because they didn't like an aspect of your book being similar to the book getting burned honestly seems overly sensitive. I think Ray Bradbury could have used a little bit of a chill pill on that one. People can send him letters saying they don't like a part of his book. I don't know why he has such a big problem with that. And if we look at, modern society, this is even more true than before. A few years after Fahrenheit 451, someone was actually arrested for distributing the poem Howl, which is indeed a grave act of censorship that would never happen today. Many types of speech are allowed to be seen by countless people on platforms like YouTube, Twitter, or Blue Sky. By the way, I have a Blue Sky, so go follow me on Blue Sky, I guess. And if for some reason these platforms decide to censor you, you can just host your own website. You can self-publish your own book if you want to. It's never been easier. So how do I feel? How do I feel about Fahrenheit 451? I think it does depict problems that are real on an individual level, problems that I see increasing on a societal level, even with brain rot, AI slop, and over-reliance on summaries, and all of the cognitive offloading we are now doing in the age of AI. But honestly, I found the push for censorship to be incompatible with reality. The people who wish to censor books will not be happy with a population completely apathetic and devoid of ideology. They want the active presence of their own ideology. So really, I think the universe of Fahrenheit 451 doesn't so much depict a world we should watch out for, that we should be wary of, where others will censor us. But rather, I think it depicts an internal battle battle we must all face. We should wonder if we are also going for easy entertainment, if we refuse to spend time with our thoughts and try to really engage with art. We should wonder how we can better form communities in our present circumstances and how we should try to be the best people we can be. And there are 3 words I looked up while reading this. There's proboscis, which is an extension from the face, like a nose, like an elephant's trunk, or, you'll see that some insects have a proboscis. There's a pratfall, which is a humiliating mistake. A filigree, an ornament or decoration made from twisted metal wire. And if you enjoy talking about Fahrenheit 451, you may be interested in talking about The Catcher in the Rye, and whether Holden Caulfield is an artistic incel. You can do that by clicking over here, but don't forget to drop me a like before you go. And remember, good night, good day, and good potato.